Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today is Monday, April 29th, 2024. This morning we are convening as the Board of Social Services to listen to our quarterly update from our friends and colleagues at the Larimer County Department of Human Services. My name is John Kafalis, Commissioner, District 1, joined by my colleagues, Kristen Stevens from District 2, Jody Shedek McNally from District 3. We have a variety of folks here, as well as our Assistant County Manager, Lori Kadrich. And to begin, Lori, is there anything you wish to say, or shall we turn it over to the folks?
I think we can turn it right over to the folks.
Katie. Great. If you would all be kind, Heather, if you would be kind enough to introduce your team, and we'll proceed.
Good morning, Heather O'Hare, Human Services Director. We are going to do introductions in the beginning rather than at each presentation because we have a lot of discussion items, so I think it'll make more sense to do it now. So I'll have Lori start.
Good morning, Lori Metz, Division Manager, Aging and Adult Services.
Good morning, Jill Maasch, Division Manager, Administration, Communication, and Excellence.
Good morning, Stuart Jenkins, Legislative Analyst.
Good morning, Kayleen Rowley, Business Operations Coordinator.
Good morning, Gordon Coombes, Operations Division Manager.
Good morning, Vanessa Fewell, Benefits and Community Support Division Manager.
And good morning, Thad Paul, Division Manager for Child, Youth, and Family.
Great. Thank you all. Welcome. And before we get into the presentation, just a quick note. I was going to mention it a moment ago, but I forgot. And if you're wondering why we are having a work session in the Commissioner's hearing room, is because the second floor, which is primarily the Commissioner's area, we're having a renovation that's including the conference room area. So for the next foreseeable future, we'll be having our work sessions here in the Commissioner's hearing room. Heather, please proceed.
Thank you. So you have a packet in front of you, and we have several presentations that we're going to touch on. And as part of the legislative presentation, we will touch, again, just an update on budget. So we'll cover CCAP, give you an update on where that's at, where a couple of other programs are, as we talk about JBC decision items. But before we get started, is there anything that you wanted to add today?
Colleagues, is there anything that you'd like to ask that may not be on the agenda? No. And I presume, will there be a quick update on the matter of CBMS?
Yes.
Very good.
Yes, we will cover that as part of the legislative presentation.
Thank you.
So we will start. Lori's going to give us an update. It's been, I think, a year, maybe even a year and a half since we've talked about the Aid to the Needy and Disabled Navigator services. And so Lori wants to give you an update on that, and then we'll touch on some legislative work that's happening this session that pertains to that as well.
Great, thank you. Good morning. I believe I have the power here to change the slides.
Point it down here.
Point it down there. Okay, thank you. Kayleen's going to move through the slides for me. Lori Metz, Division Manager, Aging and Adult Services. So thank you for letting me come in this morning. Where am I seeing it change? Just so I know, because I can only see myself up there. Yay, there it is. So the Disability Navigator program is administered through Larimer County Human Services, and it exists within the Aging and Adult Services Division. It began as a pilot in 2021 to gauge need within the community for assistance with the Social Security process and navigation on that side of things. A&D, just so that you know, is the Aid to the Needy and Disabled program. Yes.
Lori, just one moment.
Yes.
Cassidy, could you make sure it's showing up on the broadcast, the screen, or the slides?
Yes, Commissioner. I'm trying to select the input, but I believe, staff, do you have a blank screen up by chance on your, or you could you switch the monitors?
Cassidy.
Thank you.
I can see it on mine.
I just want to make sure that folks watching can see the slides.
Of course.
Thank you all. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh,
yeah, I was getting the input earlier and had the title screen, but now the input is black.
Oh, that's strange.
We'll figure it
And
out.
none of our screens are blank, so we're not sure what the issue is.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can select.
Oh, now my screen went black. Now it's back. Yeah.
I believe that I have to select it on the touch screen out there.
It's saying staff PC.
Are both of the two monitors, is one black and one's got the slide on it?
The
There's
two
one
monitors
that's-
towards the ceiling are not showing the slides, but our individual monitors are showing the slides, as
And-
well as what's up on the screen.
And we have one monitor that's here at the table that's black, but the rest of them showing the slides.
So
Are you able to switch the slides to the monitor that's black?
We're working on it. Let's see.
Okay, thank you.
It says there's no HDMI signal for this device.
Cassidy, would it be wise to recess for a moment to give you folks a couple of minutes to figure this out, or what do you think?
Yes, sir. If that's all right, I would request that.
Yes, and meanwhile, we'll practice our meditation skills and
Okay,
be able
thank
to
you.
pause a little bit. Thank you. We'll come off the broadcast, and we'll return in a matter of minutes. Thank you. Okay, thank you all for your patience. We will resume this work session at 10:21 a.m. We had to come off the air to address some technical difficulties. We had just begun with a presentation on one of the agenda items regarding the update on the Disability Navigator program. We'll turn it back over to Lori, and we're hoping that the slides will be broadcast.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. Again, Lori Metz, Division Manager for Aging and Adult Services. The application process for Supplemental Security Insurance, also known as SSI, is lengthy and it's challenging. And it is an application that is required to be active and invested and involved with to keep on that A&D Navigator program. Next slide, please. So this program assists clients who are receiving that cash benefit, which is called A&D, Aid to the Needy and Disabled, and in the process of getting that Social Security benefit. So to be eligible for this program, they need to be a resident of either Jackson or Larimer County, because here in Larimer County, we do share a Social Security office with Jackson County, so we assist their clients as well. Be between the ages of 18 and 59, and have that disability that is 6 months or longer that prevents them from working. So, just one moment. In addition to this, those clients do have to agree to work with us. So I just want to put that out there, that this is not something that we are forcing individuals to do, but it is a referral process, and then we institute that relationship with them. Okay, go ahead. So what we can help with, and I'm not going to read through this slide completely, is getting that application started for Social Security, assisting them through that process, which can be challenging, lengthy. A lot of the individuals that we are working with are experiencing homelessness or are in situations of instability when it comes to housing. Submitting the application. So here, not just in Colorado, obviously, but only paper applications can be submitted for Social Security in person. So that is an interesting piece that we'll actually talk about later in the analysis of the program. And no appointments can be made. That all has to be on a first come, first served basis, which prevents that challenge as well. And then the appeals. Unfortunately, most individuals are declined SSI that first round, so we are assisting those individuals with appealing that decision and with the amount of requests that come in for additional documentation from Social Security. Next slide. All right, so Jill's team has an amazing employee named Taylor Little who will do analysis of different programs, and he sat with our 2 Navigator staff for several weeks to look at the program so that we could bring information to you today and kind of decide what the future is. So in 2023, we had 27 people approved for SSI. The average length of time for someone to get on SSI without navigation is almost 2 years. So that's pretty unbelievable. To have that many people move onto that level of stability when it comes to both healthcare insurance, which would be Medicaid, and having that cash benefit. So the other piece is the dollars recouped. So this actually isn't accurate because we've had another approval come in. But because Aid to Needy and Disabled is a state-only funded program, when we get the approval through Social Security, we actually get the money back here in Larimer County that we have paid out to those individuals. So over $85,000 was recouped in just 2023. And some of those are larger sums of money. We had one individual that it was almost $25,000 alone that we recouped back here. So while that isn't something that, it's important just to know that that is a huge benefit to this program as well, is that while we are assisting these people while they are in that pending status, we do receive that money back at this point. And then the average amount recouped is around $3,400. And in ongoing cases, so we have one Navigator for all of Larimer County, and then we have a case aide as well. And as of March, she had 155 open cases. So those are people that have agreed to work with her and that she has initiated the application with them through Social Security. So she is what's called their authorized representative, and Social Security then communicates with her anytime they need anything else, whether it be documentation or an interview with this individual, whatever that may be. And actually I just met with her on Thursday of last week, and she's up to 178 clients. And so there's a huge number of them. All right. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we did ask for an analysis of this program. And one of the things that Taylor does when he works with people is he asks them to do essentially a time study and share what duties they are spending the most time on. So this is just a snapshot of the things that our senior case manager or navigator, her name is Leanne, says that she spends most of her time on, which is those client interviews, gathering the documentation, and completing the application. And again, because a lot of these individuals are experiencing homelessness or have an instability in that area, she spends a lot of time trying to connect with them, trying to maintain that relationship with them on that piece. The case aide does supportive duties, as it lists here, and then they have some duties that they both do, which is a lot of fielding questions from clients when they get the automated letters from CBMS about maybe the A&D benefit, or maybe if they're on SNAP or other types of benefits, just working through those things with them. We do have a great relationship in Vanessa's team about that communication with those individuals that are processing benefits. Unfortunately, we do have a little bit of struggle with the interface between Social Security and CBMS. So we do have a lot of time that is spent on getting people back on benefits because Social Security system doesn't communicate with CBMS to say, yes, they have an active Social Security application, and they get kicked off A&D. So then we have to reapply and get them back on. So that is a very time-consuming piece on their end. And, you know, I think that they understand that there's nothing that we can do about it at this point. And so it's just a constant checking in the system to make sure that the two of them are talking to each other. One of the things I wanted to point out is that inefficient processes in the pain points section that Leanne has shared with me, but, you know, we don't really have any authority or control over, is Social Security still requires in-person wet signatures from individuals. So we are unable to do anything electronically at this point. So we can send some documents to clients that they can sign electronically, but a lot of it does have to be done in a wet way. And then, as I mentioned before, the document delivery to Social Security is in person, and we have to wait in line with everybody else who's there for an appointment, and that time that they sit and wait is between 1 to 4 hours. And we have staff sitting, waiting that amount of time. So, and, you know, I think that the process length is just something to also keep in mind. As most of you know, 80% of all applications are denied on the first attempt. The appeal can take approximately 1 year. And because of how the increase in referrals that we're seeing to the Navigator program, Leanne is actually 4 weeks out in scheduling those initial interviews with people. So she's busy, that's for sure. Okay, next slide.
Is there a reason why it's not showing up there?
It never.
We had it, and now we don't. Now we have it.
He's toggling.
He's
Okay.
switching back and forth
Oh,
between her
Thank
talking.
you.
oh, there it is. Okay. So lastly, we just wanted to share with you what's next. So, and Stuart and Heather are going to jump in if they have other things. So, in the most recent legislative session, House Bill 24-1360 created what's called the Colorado Disability Opportunity Office within the Department of Labor. Unfortunately, the allocation for the A&D Navigator program statewide was taken to create this office. So, and several other disability programs that they felt were doing similar things were brought in together in this one office that's going to be part of the Department of Labor. So if anybody sees well, you see them everywhere. We have them in our house. The solid colored Colorado license plates. So the proceeds from that, a percentage of that is to go to this program. And I think we're expecting, I don't know, like a very small amount, and it's in the millions that they've got. So I think they had to move quickly to create an office to utilize this fund. So, but unfortunately, part of that was to take in this A&D Navigator allocation statewide. So the goal of that office is to implement a statewide strategy to facilitate economic stability for individuals with disabilities and promote successful economic, social, and community integration, and to identify and address issues related to that. So what will now happen is that we will have to apply to get that funding instead of it being allocated to us to run this program. And there will be length of time as our current allocation ends on June 30th at the end of this fiscal year, but we are not able to apply for the next round of funding until January of 2025. So we have a 6-month time period we are trying to figure out what to do with these 155 plus people that we're currently case managing, that there won't be an allocation for. So I don't know if Heather wants to talk about this piece, but so we are coming to you today to share with you that we're looking for other opportunities for funding.
I would just add that, so counties initially, when we saw the bill draft, were not included at all. There is a funding committee that's in statute that makes the decisions around these dollars. And so thankfully, to a lot of Stuart's work, he was able to advocate to members of the governor's staff and other people that are working on this bill that counties should be able to apply for these grant funds. So we've been able to get that piece into the bill, but one of the challenges, currently the allocation is about 1.4 million statewide. There's only a handful of counties that have volunteered to provide this service. And what we've heard is that moving forward, the grant may only be as little as 250,000. So we're trying to figure out, we wanted to update you because the funding is going to end here in just a couple of months at the end of the state fiscal year. So we're trying to figure out, there is not a transition plan as we've talked with the proponents of this bill because the new office isn't set up yet. It's going to be an entirely new office that's created sometime this fall. And as Lori said, they expected several $100,000 to be able to spend, and they're over $6 million in what they're bringing in. So they didn't have spending authority, first of all. And so the creation of this office had to go through the JBC process for the spending authority. There's a lot of logistics at play, and they scraped the allocation from CDHS to put into this same pot. So it is very likely that we will no longer serve Jackson County. It's been a very small, I don't know that we've had any referral. So we'll communicate that with Jackson County, and I've had those conversations with my peer there. But we are trying to figure out, because the number of individuals that Lori's team has been able to get onto Social Security in a very small fraction of the time it would have taken them themselves. We're trying to analyze the recruitment of those funds and how we might be able to sustain this program ongoing, at the very least, so that there's not sort of a cliff effect come June 30th that we have to stop all of our work with these individuals. Weld County actually administered this program before the funds were available. So I'm talking with my peers there to see how they have done it in years past. So we will keep you updated, and we will definitely have this as an update at our next Board of Social Services meeting, and just let you know what we're able to do so that we're hopefully able to sustain the program, but at the very least, how we're able to help the individuals transition and try to get them onto Social Security if we do have to stop administering it.
Thank you, Lori and Heather. Colleagues, do you have any questions or comments? Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, thank you for letting us know about this. So what would it take to sustain the program?
Well, I mean, and thank you for your question. Lori Metz again. It's, in my opinion, the allocation that we get is not very large at this point. And so I can't speak to an exact number, but, we would have to maintain 2 staff is what we would have to do. I would love to see more staff in this program just to be able to serve people quicker.
Yeah, because 178 is a pretty big caseload
Correct.
of folks.
Correct. And our current, it's not really a contract, but memorandum of understanding with CDHS for this program is that LAN has to make contact with these individuals within 72 hours of them applying for A&D. And that's a pretty tight turnaround at this volume too. So I think that there could be advocating on some of those programmatic requirements as well that would be helpful.
So in creating this new office and centralizing this, I mean, would there be local people to help with these services then? Is that how, but they would be state worker? I mean, I don't understand kind of what they're proposing here.
So there will be a pot of money that individuals or entities can apply for to run the program locally. And initially, when Stuart brought the bill draft to us, it was only community organizations and nonprofits that were eligible to apply. And with his hard work, as Heather mentioned, now county entities are eligible to apply. So we will be on a contract, essentially, should we be awarded those funds through the application process.
But there's only $1.4 million allocated for the entire state. Is that correct? Is that what you were saying?
Sorry, that's in the existing allocation.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It sounds like it could be even fewer dollars under the grant process. I don't know. We haven't heard how that's going to play out because it will have to go through the funding committee. I think the challenge for us, so this program came about from legislation in 2018. And then the funding was put on hold when everything happened in 2020. The state wasn't sure if they were going to be able to continue to provide the funds. So we were slow to ramp up. We started really ramping up in late 2020, early 21. But the reason we did is because we didn't have community partners that could handle this workload either and really help people navigate it. And we also have then obviously the access into CBMS. So it is a referral from CBMS that comes through now. We don't know what that will look like in the future, if they intend to keep that. So there's system logistics too that we're waiting to hear on, but we didn't have community partners that were able to do this initially. And so I think our worry is that we don't have that capacity in the community today either when this program transitions.
And there's a 6-month gap at least for the funding, and then it would be competitive dollars that we would have to apply for. So there's not any predictability here. All right. Well, I mean, obviously a hugely important, I mean, especially since we're serving people experiencing homelessness. I mean, this could be the difference of getting people into a home. So thank you for bringing this forward, and I guess we'll put our heads together and figure out how we solve this, but certainly want to figure this out. And anyway, I mean, it sounds like thank you, Stuart, for advocating for, making it better at the state level. It sounds like there's still work to do, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Thank you. Stuart and team, thank you so much for advocating and at least getting our voices in there. And what was first question, did the sponsors of the bill say what the problem they were trying to solve, or they were just trying to create this office? I'm just curious.
Thank you, Stuart Jenkins, legislative analyst. I think the idea is to consolidate different programs and staff functions and services within the executive branch to help provide more holistic, comprehensive support to disability programs writ large across state government. There will still be separate programs in different agencies like vocational rehab within Department of Labor and Employment. But there will be this office will serve as a kind of coordinating advisory kind of organizations, keeping track of all the efforts at the state level to support those with disabilities, ensure that any recommendations around reports or strategic plans for this particular community are all being coordinated, reviewed, and that those recommendations and action plans are filtering out to the different entities. So this is, they're not supposed to take on this disability navigation work per se, but to provide more strategic oversight and coordination of the work happening across the state. But because of this particular funding committee is within a different agency, they do want to move that over to help kind of provide more oversight over those grant dollars with the disability perspective.
If I might, Mr. Chair. So when I'm going to, my colleague Commissioner Stevens asked some of my other questions, so I want to repeat a little bit, because Heather, you mentioned that my other question was who is doing this with our partners in the nonprofit world or other agencies. I don't know of anyone who's doing that. So and do we know of anybody across the state that has someone who's doing that well? Or did they just not think about this overall, but how this work needs to be done?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Shattuck McNally. Lori Metz again. So here locally in Larimer County, Disabled Resource Services had historically, a part-time, half-time person that would help people work through the process. But there was never a formalized process on how they would find out that someone was needing the assistance like we have in this program. And I just want to emphasize that these are individuals applying for supplemental security insurance, not disability.
Yeah,
Because that's a little different on that side. And Disabled Resource Services did help with the disability application side. And so I think that these things were informally happening in our community with people who were self-identified, maybe within different nonprofits or community agencies that were knowledgeable or had a relationship with someone at Social Security, but they weren't formalized until this program came about in 2019. And again, there wasn't, from a county participation standpoint, it was not, largely across the state. It was only a handful.
Okay, so, and I'm sure Stuart has shared those numbers and advocated at the governor's office to understand what they're kind of disrupting, correct? Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys bringing this to our attention, and certainly, but if you, I think we got these slides, but any other data sheets or something on this would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think some of the questions I was going to ask have been asked and discussed. I guess my biggest concern is the 155 folks. We'll be able to continue to supporting them, and I appreciate, Lori, that you mentioned. I mean, in the past, Disabled Resource Services used to do this work at some level, and so there have been resources. And I presume that when you're looking at options, you're looking at community-based groups like Disabled Resource Services, but perhaps even Homeward Alliance that, oversees Murphy Center. A lot of folks experiencing homelessness go there, but I'm sure you're thinking about all that. I guess I'll offer one question, and I believe, Stuart, you and I have talked about this, but this Office of Colorado Disability Opportunity Office, how will it impact at all the work of the Office of Employment First, which I think, is that in Department of Labor and Employment, or is it in Department of Human Services?
I believe that's in the Department of Labor and Employment.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts on whether or not the work that they're doing about helping people with disabilities get meaningful employment, how these two are supposed to interact, or hopefully in a synergistic way?
I think that's the hope. Thank you, Commissioner, for the question. I think that's the hope, is for this office to provide that higher level oversight and partnership and coordinate, ensuring that the work that's done out of Employment First, they produce annual reports and recommendations around how to support those disabilities gain employment, to ensure that those any recommendations or that they advise are filtered out to the appropriate other state agencies and partners, to ensure that that work is being broadcast and understood. If they have legislative recommendations, to ensure that that is part of perhaps the governor's or the department's legislative priorities and agenda. So I think this role in this office is to ensure that there's a lot of coordination and more communication to lift up the work that all these disability partners and entities are doing to advance that. So,
thank you, Stuart. I think, please keep us apprised, and I believe we can now move into the next agenda item, legislative update, and certainly appreciate your advocacy, Stuart, that helped get the counties into the mix, and a couple of other things, I'm sure. Heather, what's next?
all right. I didn't realize it was up so soon. Here we go. Well, a good transition. Thank you, Commissioners. Stuart Jenkins, Legislative Analyst with the Human Services Department. So I'm excited to share that we are currently 9 days until the legislative session adjourns on Wednesday, May 8th. So sine die is upon us. This presentation for this legislative update will cover HS bills, key bills that we've been following as a department, some of the priorities and positions that you all have taken on human services legislation this session, and some updates on where the budget and the state budget have landed for fiscal year 24-25. So next, yep, perfect. So First bill, House Bill 1031, sponsored by Reps. Bradley and Joseph and Senators Kirkmeyer and Michael St. This bill will improve accessibility for persons in child welfare. This mostly clarifies and aligns Colorado statute with federal requirements around providing language access. One of the key amendments that was made to the bill recently to help reduce the fiscal note was losing the CDHS was required to create a statewide language access plan that counties really excited to see provide a map and understand the gaps and disparities for where we can improve language access. There is not funding for the department to do that this year, so counties will now just simply be expected to comply with these requirements, but no additional resources at this time to do so. Larimer County itself has been making a lot of efforts and strides in this area, so happy to have Thad speak to any potential workload or impacts.
Yeah, the bigger workload is it's the time, the staff time for the folks that have records.
I'm sorry, who are you?
Sorry, Thad Paul, Division Manager, Child, Youth, and Family. So I think the broader impact is the workload impact, and it more actually impacts folks in Gordon's shop from a content management and records. So we have to translate all the records requests that may be coming from families, which can be in excess of 1,000 different documents. So there's a workload and a cost associated with that. There's also a cost associated with, and we've already been doing this in Larimer, but translation services. We have, and I think you guys all noticed that at our child welfare annual awards that we had on Friday. Thank you all for coming. We have an increased capacity of language diversity in our agency. I think you guys, that was highlighted by one of our staff that was on the, helping to facilitate and translate for a family that was present and winning some awards. But there are we don't have enough staff to do all that work, and so there are increased access translation costs that are coming. It's the right thing to do. It's what's required by federal law, but more importantly, it's the right thing to do for families, and it's a workload and a cost that is not trickling down, and Heather will get to more of the broader future cost impacts that are coming on a broader scale, and I'll cover a little bit of that in a little while as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder, if folks could talk into their mics as best as they can so we can make sure to hear. And I appreciate that the different languages saying thank you has Greek up at the top.
I'll also add, I'm Jill Maasch with Administration, Communication, and Excellence, that we have expanded the contracts that we have to provide interpretation and translation. So we now work with 3 companies in the area to provide on-demand services. Sorry, I keep looking away, but on-demand services for phone, video, so Zoom calls, things like that, as well as in person. So those are some things that we've added as well.
All right, next slide. Thank you. So House Bill 1046, Child Welfare System Tools. This bill is one of the bills that came out of the Child Welfare Interim Committee, so was House Bill 1031 as well. This is now over in the Senate, waiting action and appropriations. This simply creates more requirements for the state to audit different risk and family safety assessment tools. It does encourage better data collection around demographics for the state in partnership with counties. So I think expect minimal workload and impact for our department in particular, and excited that this is moving forward. The sponsors for this bill, Reps. Evans, Duran and Evans, and Senators Kolker and Kirkmeyer, for your awareness.
And if I might highlight real quick again, Thad Paul, Child, Youth, and Family Division. We're hopeful. So there's a few counties that are using and we did a presentation with you all on the Larimer Decision Aid tool. So the tool that helps kind of create a risk score for families. That tool is very much the back end of that score of that tool is very much aligned with our current risk tool. So we're hopeful with those other 2 counties to actually encourage the state to allow us to pilot the use of that tool instead of the use of the tool within the trail system.
Okay, next slide. Thank you. So Senate Bill 8, Kinship Foster Care Homes. This is now sitting over in House Appropriations, so it has made it to the other chamber. This is another bill that came out of the Child Welfare Interim Committee. The main thrust of this bill is to create the option for non-certified kin care homes to reduce some of the regulations for existing, for the licensing of foster care for kinship homes, and create a reimbursement model and mechanism for the non-certified kin homes. So they have finally figured out the funding piece of this. They will start, the original vision for this was to create a 50% reimbursement of the established foster care rate for the non-certified kin. That's going to start at 30% and eventually get to 50% starting in 2026, 2027, that fiscal year. So there'll be time for this to scale up and grow. The rulemaking should go through the State Board of Human Services later this year or early next year to reduce the regulations on the certified kinship homes. So excited to see this move forward, but I know there will be a certain impact to our department on the workload that Thad can speak to as well.
Yeah, thank you again, Thad Paul. We have about 89 to 90 kids on a daily average that are actually in a kinship home that are in a so we don't have custody is what that means. More often than not, they've been given temporary custody from the courts. Historically, we had some additional support that TANF could provide to help support those families. So the use of this bill will actually allow us to transition out of the use of TANF to support those families and into child welfare. I'll see it I'll believe it when I see it, I guess is what I would say from an appropriations perspective, if it will be enough to actually account for our kinship numbers. We have, with all of our kinship numbers combined, we have over 140 to 150 kids in a kinship setting on any given day. The certification requirements will continue to reduce to become a certified foster parent or certified kinship provider. But it's still an intrusive process. So more often than not, kin would prefer to choose the path of least resistance. They have temp custody. They get to make much more of the unilateral decisions on how they run their household that way. So this additional support will help them. If more families actually do go into the certified kinship process, that is a workload. There is a safe study, a home study that have to be done. So an increased workload from staff that we currently are understaffed in our kinship programming just because of allocation limitations.
All right. So the last bill under the important kind of hot bill topics is Senate Bill 200. This is equity, diversity, inclusion, and child welfare. So this is legislation that helps kind of actualize the proposal from the Colorado Human Services Directors Association that they shared with the Child Welfare Interim Committee last year, that we were grateful to Senators Michelson, Janae, and Coleman for getting us late bill status with this, and excited to have CCI's and CCAT's support on this bill as well. But this will essentially focus on better data collection around demographics for children in the child welfare system and reporting on that. So there's a full statewide assessment of and kind of scope and time of where we're at in terms of addressing disparities or disproportionality. And then it will improve the proficiencies and demonstrations for child welfare staff around equity, diversity, and inclusion. So data collection, better training are the main points of this bill. And we see it as a first step in a whole range of options to pursue to improve equity within the system. This bill is now actually sitting over in the House. It has its committee hearing in House Health and Human Services today, this afternoon. There's no fiscal note from the state, and I think we're needing to get that in order to get the bill passed and introduced. So that's positive. The state said that they can accomplish this within their existing staff and resources within their equity office.
Before you go on, Stuart and Heather, I just have a quick question on this one, Senate Bill 24-200. Can you be more specific about the types of improved data collection that will occur? Because I seem to recall that at least at one presentation of the Colorado Human Services Directors Association a while back earlier in the year, there was some good information that showed some of the disparities out there in the child welfare system. So how will this improve upon that?
It's a great question. So one very specific example, there isn't anywhere in Trails where we can capture either a parent or a child with a disability. There isn't a field for us to capture that, so we have to capture it in our narrative notes. So when we're talking about language access, there isn't a place for us to capture if their primary language is something other than English. But the hope is that it will also add a lot more nuance in how we're capturing race and ethnicity data as well. So I would say Trails and the data that's in Trails around demographic data is still not the best, but unfortunately it's the best across all of the state systems we have. When we talk about SNAP, SNAP doesn't capture really any of this information. So, but the piece that's really crucial is the training as well, because it is the caseworker, or maybe it's whoever's receiving that referral over the phone to the hotline, being able to ask those questions in a really respectful, cultural way, so that then the information that goes into Trails is good quality information that we can pull reports on, that we can actually have very targeted strategies to impact that high-level data that has been presented. So it's the training and the data collection together that'll be really crucial. That, like Stuart said, we're hopeful that it will then drive future legislative initiatives or strategic initiatives across counties to do something with that information.
Thank you. That's very helpful. We'll go to the commissioners if they have a question on this, and perhaps others that we've already talked about before we move into the Larimer County priorities. But and maybe you spoke to this, Stuart, but how is it that you can do this work without any money?
So, yeah, great question. Thank you, Commissioner. So there will be no additional appropriation needed to implement this bill. So the state, the Colorado Department of Human Services says that they can accomplish the policies within this bill within their existing resources. So it is getting funding and support, but they're doing it within their budget as it exists.
And you have a reasonable level of confidence in that assumption?
That's a good, like Director Paul said, I'll believe when I see it. There will be, I think something to note is we've asked for the department to put out the report from the data they have in Trails with the data they currently have. There's the expectation that we hope that, like for some of the fields around primary language or disability status and others that are mentioned in the bill, that they will need to build out Trails to do that. That will require an appropriation in the future, not something that we expect in this fiscal year, though.
Thank you. I believe our in-house expert on the trail system, Commissioner Stevens, had her hand up. Then, of course, if there are other...
Stuart kind of answered the question,
Okay.
like, I mean, what does it look like for the trail system? Does that create kind of additional, will the folks that are working on it have to kind of go back in to allow for those kind of fields to be captured? And yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so, just let me know if I need to be talking to anyone about appropriations, because I'm familiar with that with Trails.
Commissioner,
But I like that we're going to do this, so this is important.
any other questions on any of the other bills before we move forward or go to Commissioner Shattuck McNally? Okay, Commissioner.
It's great to see the intent of this bill, and I'm hoping that they will be able to implement it and proceed as they intend. So we'll look forward to hearing about this. Thank you.
Just to highlight, I think, as Heather pointed, maybe more important is the training aspect that will be delivered through the training academy. It's a pretty robust system at the state level, so it'll be a focused training opportunity. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to highlight that one of our own went down and testified in support of this bill. Paul Gamino, who's one of my supervisors, and actually also Molly Warren, who's in my seat in Boulder, who was a former employee from Larimer County. So actually, Larimer was well represented in advocating for this bill.
And actually, if I may, that brings up another quick question, I hope, and that is, will the training through the Child Welfare Academy also include training perhaps for supervisors or people that hire folks so they can look at how they can target their recruitment to hire qualified people who may reflect the people we're serving?
Yes and yes, although we've centralized our recruitment. So we have almost over 50% of our staff are bilingual. So we have seen really significant improvements in our own recruitment that falls under Jill's team. So being able to expand, there's a better fit culturally, linguistically between our staff and those that we're serving. And I think the other piece that we are very interested in having a lot of conversations about is the other piece, we have hired significant amounts of individuals who have gone through our services in their personal life, both as a child, as an adult. I think we still have the opportunity, though, to figure out how we support them differently, how we support individuals with that lived expertise coming into our coming into the county, coming into our department. We haven't quite nailed that down. I think there is opportunity to look at that differently. It's both in that we are already looking at our recruitment and our retention through the lens of making sure that we have very diverse staff, but there will be additional training for supervisors and for child welfare leadership through the same academy.
No, that's excellent. And I seem to recall that there's been good collaboration with our Human Resources Department and our Human Services folks, Jill and her team, to look at how we can adjust the, if I'm remembering right, the job descriptions to allow for more lived experience and those kinds of things. And I'm sure that's been helpful.
Yes, that I think has been a game changer.
Okey-doke. Great, thank you. I think we can proceed.
Thank you. So this next batch of bills are focusing on Larimer County's legislative priorities. So these are the ones that you either included in your 2024 legislative agenda that you all crafted last fall, late winter, and that you took positions on during this legislative session at some point. So first on that list is House Bill 1038. This is high acuity crisis for children and youth. So there's a number of different provisions in this bill that help sets up a system of care for Medicaid children with complex behavioral health needs, a training academy and quality care standards for residential child care providers, and funding for additional residential treatment providers and beds for high acuity youth. This is now waiting action on the House floor. Its final reading before it moves to the Senate. The funding is prioritized in the governor's budget and in the long bill, so that's secure. Sponsored on this, Reps. Young and Bradley and Senators Kirkmeyer and Fields. So, any questions on this one or no?
I seem to recall that the fiscal note on this one was a robust fiscal note, but I think thanks to proactive advocacy work and Stuart and others that helped the governor to determine this was a priority and to make sure that funding was in place.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have to give credit to the Human Services Directors Association and CCI that have been advocating on this for years, have sent numerous letters and advocacy and testimony. So a lot of good work to get to this point.
Great news. Let's keep going.
All right. House Bill 1360 we've covered in detail already. I think the only thing I'll respond to that came up in the Q&A was in terms of the size of the grant. So as Director O'Hare mentioned, the Disability Funding Committee is familiar and used to giving out grants. Their maximum allocation has been $250,000. They'll be jumping that appropriation up to about $6 million this year. So I think it'll be a new experience for them to get that amount of money out the door that quickly. So I think they will appreciate applications from counties and the organizations that want to do this disability navigation work, because I think they've struggled to identify those community-based organizations and nonprofits in the past to do this, and the need to show results by spending their allocation that they've been given. So hopeful that that can work. There are 12 other counties that do provide this service. One county in particular, Jefferson, does have that kind of contractual partnership and relationship with an existing entity, Easter Seals. So there are some models that we can look to and partners to consult with as we kind of navigate this program. So just want to call attention to that. That's all on this bill. We can move to the next one.
Just one specific detail that I would add to this. So we know that as part of the grant opportunity for these funds, we will have to demonstrate very solid and formalized partnerships with community partners who are serving the population of residents with disabilities. So there might be an opportunity actually in the future to potentially expand the Office on Aging Advisory Council and add maybe some of those community partners into intentional seats there, so that we're hearing from them and they have the ability to also help us provide the oversight and the feedback into this program. So we'll be looking at that piece too, but we do know that that is a requirement of the grant. When we apply, we'll have to demonstrate those formalized partnerships and how we're including those partners in helping us monitor and administer the programs day to day.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, so that'd be a statutory positions on Office on Aging, or just suggested?
So we'll have to see, we also have the adult protection team group that also meets and reviews things that are specific to adult protection services. But we'll have to see, we know that that'll be a required element of the grant. I think it's up to us, at least what we've heard. Now, we won't know for sure till the grant comes out, but I think it's up to us to show how robust and strong those partnerships already are that will help make us a stronger applicant. But we will, I think there's an opportunity to also look at just expanding our collaboration and partnership with those community partners as we continue to administer this grant if we have the opportunity.
So would you just appoint them to the Office on Aging, just make seats for them on the council? And what, because, you know, we're right in the middle of recruitment, so, and I know there's bylaws of how many people, so would these be just like advisors, or that they would be there and just, I mean, I'm open to that. I'm just trying to figure out what that looks like since we're.
I think we would come back to you all for that direction, probably
Okay.
not until next year, if the grants are going to open up next year. So we can work on that and figure out what's the best approach. We would have to modify bylaws, so we'll come back to you for that direction and see how you would like to proceed.
And then if I might, Mr. Chair, so I know you've done some extensive partnership and outreach and analytically looked at areas, and we had that presentation about feedback from all the different parts of rural areas. So there's a lot of changes and a lot of opportunity here. So I'm wondering how we kind of pull this all together so it's the least disruptive, or that it's kind of together and not kind of change and then change and then change, because you know, this group likes their routine. So I'm just curious, I mean, they're wonderful folks, but, you know, just wondering if we can kind of look at how that looks so we're doing it all in kind of a cohesive way. I'm just curious about that.
So just in case anyone is listening, so we've utilized some of the Office on Aging's direct ARPA allocation from the State Department to partner with CSU to do focus groups and research and really do that full scan across the county. Lori and I were just talking this morning. I think we are going to be bringing that back to you in our August meeting. They're wrapping up and we can present that to you. And then I think how we proceed with that and which pieces of that analysis, that research we want to act on, I think is what we'll discuss in our August BOSS meeting. But it will be, if there are changes that come, we can, you know, do it slowly and intentionally so that we're also explaining why the changes are happening and how it will provide a better service.
Okay. I might have further questions. I'll ask offline. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. Next, Senate Bill 59. This is the Children's Behavioral Health Statewide System of Care. This bill is one of the legislative priorities in your agenda. It did pass the Senate, so that one correction on the slide, and it's waiting introduction in the House. There was a placeholder set aside in the state 24-25 budget of $2.1 million to move forward with that. There's cost and utilizational analyses, an implementation plan, and advisory council is set up all within the BHA. So that is moving forward. However, in future years, there was an amendment made that limits the implementation, that the bill is subject to available appropriations. So we expect any appropriation to be limited, and it's not clear what that might look like given the BHA's kind of new role and few budget requests that they've put forward so far. We are hearing that they are still pushing back on authorizing any actual implementation of the bill and simply want to do, make it more of a study, to study what an implementation plan would look like, to conduct the cost and utilization analysis to determine what types of kids and families would be served by the system and all of that. So there's still potential amendments to be made. This has been a huge effort and fight and advocacy on behalf of CCI and the Human Services Directors Association. So more work and action remains on this bill. So
I would just add, I think 2 bills ago we had 1038, House Bill 1038, the high acuity crisis. It's my understanding from updates at CCI and conversations with other State Department staff that unfortunately they believe that's the answer. that House Bill 1038 is what's needed, and that's what will change the system over time. It is not. We have continued to respond with the system of care is what's needed long-term. The high acuity bill is unfortunately a Band-Aid fix that we need today. We are continuing to see over 70 kids every month that are stuck in hospitals, stuck in county offices. Unfortunately, there's a really difficult situation happening in Pueblo County right now where the hospital called the police on the county staff because they wouldn't come pick up a child from the hospital that was heavily medicated. And now they're investigating the Pueblo County staff for abuse and neglect themselves. So it is continuing to snowball and continuing to honestly put the safety of children at risk. And so it's the two together that we need. So I know Director Barnes is coming back. She's resumed her role as the executive director of the State Department from her, I think, almost a year interim role over the BHA. So we're hopeful that with her return, we can continue that conversation. But I just wanted to reiterate, it is the two bills together. We have to move forward on the system of care because that's how we provide behavioral health services to children from birth until 18, 21, irregardless of what insurance they may or may not have or how their family can pay for that care. So just as you're continuing to have conversations at CCI or with legislators, if you could help us advocate that it really is the two strategies together that will shift the behavioral health crisis that we have for kids in the state.
So I know the emergency rooms are not trying to be, they're at their wits' end. And I mean, they have children inside the hospital for weeks. There's nowhere to go. So, I mean, I don't know how have we engaged Colorado Medical Association. I mean, I don't know who they've engaged to kind of come and bring this, that one of the most expensive forms of care, the emergency room, is not a place to put these children. And so I'm wondering because we're down to 9 days, as Stuart said, and there's still 300 bills, and they're inducing bills. I mean, I'm just was pulling up. There's a bill that that just popped up that we're trying to navigate and mitigate the unintended consequences. So I feel like, is this if one gets done and they think that's it and the other one is just a study, is it at least a step forward, or do we really need to get the other one passed? Or what's the I mean, the worst case scenario, they both don't pass, but what's the in case we're running out of time, that this what keeps the ball or momentum going forward? Or is it if this one doesn't pass too, the other one is a short-term fix, and we have to really fight for this next year? I'm just curious what's kind of the best and worst case scenario at this point.
I would say the best case scenario is that they both move forward. And I think the system of care bill is in a pretty good place to move forward. I think it's the future years appropriations that we'll have to really watch for. And Senator Kirkmeyer, being on the JBC, has really been a strong advocate. She's one of the sponsors of the bill. So I think making sure that CCI and CCAT are continuing to engage the JBC members in the future years. We have already studied this. The Colorado Human Services Directors Association hired a consultant who has been working on this and pulling together the strategy from what other states have already implemented, and then also working through an implementation plan so it's not implementing it all at once. So I think, I hope and am optimistic it will move forward, but it is in future years that we're going to have to really watch for how we continue to fund the system slowly over time so that it's really meeting that need in future years.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, just really quick. So is that the sticking point here? Is that this is very expensive to implement? Yeah. How much is being appropriated for the initial year?
2.1 million.
2.1. Okay. And will that? I mean, that doesn't seem like very much for a big program like this. So I guess it.
I think there were politics that played into the process, to be honest. So we don't have a very confident fiscal note from the state departments, because I think they were really frustrated initially, feeling like they weren't engaged in the initial solution and developing the solution. So I think the initial fiscal note said it was going to cost over 300 million to implement. And so with the consultant that we were working with, we were able to bring in additional information from other states that showed it will be much smaller, but I don't know that we know long-term how much it's going to need, because you also, there's populations that don't have insurance at all. There's the Medicaid population, then there's private insurance, and it's going to look a little bit different for each of those populations. So trying to break that out into bite-sized chunks and then analyze what's the cost at that point is the plan over the next couple of years.
Sure, it's kind of unclear at this point, how much, but those big numbers are the ones that I had heard, so that's interesting that it was sort of, okay. It's good to know the background for it. Certainly, obviously happy to advocate for this program at JBC, and it looks like it's something we're going to have to just keep on our to-do list of something that we make sure that's funded, because I think you're right, things are in a crisis situation, and we need to figure out how to resolve that. So thank you.
If I might, real quick, I would reinforce the need of this system of care, because the other one is the Band-Aid, as Heather said. We have a couple kids out of state right now because we can't place them in the state, and we're getting really great service from them. Our local providers don't provide the same level of service as others, so Bill 1038 is very useful. But if we don't have a systems of care, what we're continuing to perpetuate is families being forced into child welfare system just to get the behavioral health needs met for their children, which is not okay.
Thank you. And just a comment and hopefully a quick question, and then we want to make sure that we don't shortchange our various leaders here. My comment is that certainly, as the chair of the State Board of Human Services, however I can be helpful, you'll keep me informed. And then my question is, what level of discussion or conversation has occurred on this topic, the two bills and how they're complementary, with the new commissioner for the Behavioral Health Administration?
My understanding is there's been a lot of discussion. So Director Barnes took the lead because she was in her seat as the interim director or interim commissioner for most of the time that this was happening. But CCI and Jamie Ulrich, who's my counterpart in Weld, Commissioner Scott James, and a couple of other commissioners who have been working very closely with CCI on this have met with her and shared sort of the framework and the plans moving forward. I think it's just waiting to see what appropriations will be and what those first implementation steps are. But they have already engaged her and met with her. It is her background. She oversaw behavioral health as part of the State Department in Nebraska. And so I think she has a really good foundation, and I think is getting up to speed on a lot of different things, but this is one of them.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Let's move on to Senate Bill 125, please.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner. So this bill enacts a new version of the Interstate Compact for the Placement of Children. They would replace the existing one once 35 states pass the compact. We're currently up to, I believe, 19 states, or Colorado would be the 19th state, to pass this legislation. Sponsors, Senators Pelton and Michael St-Jeannet, Representatives Evans and Basenecker are our own here, sponsoring this in the House. This is in the House. There was one amendment made that will create a working group to review the proposal for when the new compact would eventually go into effect. So it's been a fairly smooth process. I think some stakeholders, other child welfare entities, were concerned about not being involved in the stakeholder process originally, but I think that's been addressed, and this has received bipartisan support throughout the process. So glad to see that moving forward. And then Senate Bill 136. This is the Uniform Guardianship and Conservatorship Act. I know we've discussed this at length at a couple of times during session. So there has been progress on addressing the county's outstanding concerns with this bill. The main one being the ability for third-party entities or individuals, any individual, to ignore a court-ordered guardianship, which would significantly impact and affect our adult protective services team. That we are hearing that provision will be struck from the bill entirely, and there's progress with proponents in addressing a couple of the other concerns that we have regarding clarifying the ability for agents or for guardians to delegate their authority to agents. So there'll be tightening of that, who can qualify for that and what that authority would be. And then third, and a smaller issue is just around the requirement for guardianship plans in the bill. There are already existing annual reports that guardians and conservators provide, so this would just be updating those existing requirements with some of the new provisions in the bill, so it hopefully shouldn't duplicate or create redundant reports for our team. So anyways, good progress on the amendments. I think our team and these personal stories that we've shared and anecdotes from our staff and the clients that they've worked with, particularly with Senators Janal, has been extremely impactful in shaping this conversation and in getting progress on the amendments. So just want to thank the team that stepped up to share those personal stories. Okay. Last update, and I promise this is just a couple slides, are around the lot of info on these, but the state budget for fiscal year 24-25. So under the Department of Human Services, we're proud to see, happy to see some increases or maintenance of funds going from the state to the counties. First, with county administration for SNAP, to support staffing for SNAP enrollment. The JBC and the legislature approved $16.7 million that they provided over the last couple of years. So it'll maintain what we've been receiving, but we already know that that's currently being overspent, and there is greater need within this line item to support counties. So it's positive news, more work to do, more effort to focus the legislature's attention on the staffing needs for the county in that space. The second item is around child welfare county staffing. So this would help implement part of the funding model and recommendations that came out of, I think it was Senate Bill 235, if I'm not mistaken, that would provide $9 million over the next 3 years, so $27 million total to support county staffing, particularly for child welfare. So the total underfunded need we see for child welfare is $66 million. So this does make progress in tackling some of the need and gap, but a lot more work to do in that space. And then finally, in state funding for senior services, the JBC and the legislature did approve a $2 million increase to support senior services provided by the area agencies on aging or AAAs. Again, short of the need that many associations and agencies expect for this population. So at least it's something, but another need to fund.
Can I add, sorry, can I give just a little bit more context to each of those three? So what you'll see missing on this slide is TANF. There is no additional funding for TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. The piece that's really crucial with that is that over the last 3 years, there have been pretty significant increases to the basic cash assistance that recipients receive that has been cobbled together so far with sort of a third of a funding from the state, a third from ARPA, and a third from counties. We are responsible for absorbing that entirely in next year's allocation. So with regard to TANF, unfortunately, we're seeing the caseload increase for the recipients that are coming. It is a program that we are required to provide. So if someone comes in and applies and they are eligible for the basic cash assistance, we have to provide it. And then all of the other supportive services or economic services that we try to wrap around that person, that's the voluntary piece. So we have had to stop supporting kinship families out of our TANF budget. Because we are projected to be overspent. We've also had to stop supportive services and TANF diversion because we are already expected to be overspent in this existing year and looking at having to absorb as much as $400,000 in basic cash assistance for next year. So I wanted to share that with you all in that, one, it's missing. There was not additional funding from the JBC. and there is a significant shift in the funding for that program into the next year. And many of the child welfare bills that we already covered are tapping into the state's TANF reserves. So the reserves are going to be dwindling at the state level, and we are going to have to figure out statewide how to fund that program. We can't continue to tap into reserves or continue to increase in that program if there isn't funding to come with it. With county admin, the $16.7 million was one-time funding that we've already received. So we are very grateful that that will be sustained as part of the base allocation moving forward. We're already spending above that. And so unfortunately, we've had to put 10 to 12 vacancies on hold while the workload continues to increase very significantly, particularly in our SNAP recipients. So we're trying to figure out, and like Stuart said, what the state needs just to cover existing spending was closer to 30 million. And unfortunately, the resources just weren't there. So we are one of 10 counties that's participating in a workload study. We are hopeful that that will impact the funding for this program. We haven't seen those workload studies provide that benefit in other programs. So I think we're also a little hesitant, but the JVC is really looking to that workload study for future funding. So we are having to make and have made shifts in this program already to try to come closer to our allocation as we go into closeout this year, but then also into next year. Within child welfare, there's been a lot of discussion about the funding model and the workload study that has come out of the child welfare process and through the child welfare allocation committee. We are struggling currently within the existing allocation because we are very underfunded. Some analysis of those funding models showed that we were as much as $5 million underfunded. So we are having to make cuts to services now. We are having to revise contracts for some of our services with community partners. We also have put 8 vacancies on hold in child welfare because if we aren't we fully believe we will not be fully covered at closeout this year because there are so many counties that are overspending and in similar situations to us, and we will have to tap into either TANF reserves or fund balance. And then next year doesn't look much different. We will receive some additional funding from the staffing that's included here, but not a whole lot, while the Child Welfare Allocation Committee has decided to try to rework the funding model because what the state got back from the contractor wasn't sufficient and didn't provide what I believe the legislature was looking for with that contract. So you may hear from community partners that we're having to cut some contracts now. We are having to do that because we are very overspent, while we're also having to put some of the vacancies on hold to be able to come closer to our allocation. And then I would say in the area of Office on Aging and adult protection, we don't know what our slice of the 2 million will be, but it is very likely that we're already spending that. And in adult protection, that is actually, it's one of the smallest allocations, but it is the one that I am the most concerned about because it just has continued to increase without any additional funding. And I would go so far as to say it's an unfunded mandate. They are reducing the services allocation to try to add more money into the administrative allocation. And when we overspend in adult protection, it goes straight to fund balance. There isn't another sort of process that it can tap into different pots of funding. So we've been having a lot of conversations about the services to older adults and their families, and doing a lot of research around what additional grants there might be. How can we try to come closer to meeting the need as we're seeing the resources and the funding dwindle? So just wanted to add that context and give you an update on the budget presentation we presented in the last meeting.
Thank you. Commissioner Shaddock McNally, you had your hand up, I believe.
Yes, thank you. I have a lot of questions, so I'm going to rattle through them, but I'm hoping you can, in the interest of time, can we just kind of put them on the list, get back to me?
I think this is probably the most important. The department activity report will give you a
Right.
quick update on, but I think this is probably the most important, so I'm
Well,
happy to
that's
spend
why
as much time.
just, because I have a lot of concerns about this. Of course, 2 million's better than nothing because there was nothing and it had been cut. So I'm glad for that, but I still feel like my question is, what's the workload on staff? Is it beyond, and what do we need to do to support staff? Because the need has increased because we have, the population's aging and we have a lot of folks who are sandwiched in between and caregivers like myself. And so I kind of like to dig into that a little bit. And I'm worried about what it looks like for next year. And obviously, just like the Colorado Forest Health Council, we already started on 2025 and budget requests. So I'm wondering what we need to do now to make and so I'm wondering what kind of story or numbers we can share. And I'm wondering about the workload for the staff because as I understand, there is more need and workload is pretty heavy. And so I'd just like to dive into that a little more. Certainly with vacancies open and more stress, more need, certainly food assistance is still very high. Is there a way you can show us kind of a picture for us versus other counties, but just the need overall, especially in the Front Range? And so, because we're going to be having conversations with folks, and the more I have these in my back pocket and pushing on this, because I think we need to really make this aware that the need is increasing, and like you said, starting to become unfunded mandates, and we need to maybe start tracking that so they understand, because with certain things coming forward on the ballot, and this could really exacerbate an already strained and overstressed system. And then I'm wondering, my other question is, with the reduction in victim services, and it seems like our nonprofit partners across the board are all struggling with fundraising right now. How does that all come together as a system to kind of reduce the amount of availability for services? So I'm just curious. So that's a lot, but I just would like to dive into this a little better. But in the interest of time, this is one I was waiting to get to because I was really concerned about how this is all kind of coming together as a perfect storm. And I just want to make sure that we're thinking about staff workloads, because they probably feel like they can't keep up and burn out, and if you have vacancies, and I'm concerned about that, because those are the people that are boots on the ground helping folks, and I want to make sure they have all the resources, and I know you all do too. So I just want to really get ahead of this and see what we need to do and how we need to advocate, because to me this is a very concerning slide. So thank you.
So we will get you specific data, but I can tell you for the metro counties, there's been a 137% increase in SNAP alone. For Larimer, it is very significant. The part that makes it even more challenging is that every time that the Colorado Benefits Management System is down for 1 hour, there are 800 families that we can't serve for just 1 hour. And so about a week and a half ago, the system was down from 10 a.m. on Friday until midnight Monday morning. So people were coming in to apply for SNAP, and we had to say, I'm sorry, the state system is down. You're going to have to come back next week. Here are the food banks and the food pantries. Here's how we can help you cobble together for the weekend. So unfortunately, in your packet, you have a letter that CCI approved trying to advocate for an interim committee on public benefits and CBMS. Unfortunately, it was not chosen as an interim committee, which I think is really unfortunate. So CCI and CCAT are going to work together to actually have a committee over the summer that's going to look at all of the same information and potentially move towards some CCI priority bills, hoping that we can try to achieve the same outcome that an interim committee would have. But when the system is not up and running too, that's really what paralyzes us for days on end. So we are constantly watching it, and Vanessa and her team have dashboards and daily reports where they're looking at that workload. And so we will we have a really good pipeline of people they're in training now for vacancies that we have. The other piece is it takes several months to be trained in these programs. So we're trying to keep that pipeline still moving while we try to curb spending in other areas where we can. So, but if the workload becomes such that we have to fill those vacancies, we have to fill those vacancies because this is a federally required program that we have to administer. It's in the service contracts and the other pieces that we're spending that aren't federally required, unfortunately, where we have to slow the spending because we have to be able to provide SNAP, but chances are we might not be able to then also provide employment training, which is really, that I think is the most heartbreaking part. You know, you talk about CCAP, we're spending more in CCAP now than we did before the freeze. Our spending is continuing to go up in CCAP. So how do we lift people out of poverty while we're also trying to reduce spending is very challenging. So we're having a lot of meetings with other departments, Mark Johnston and his team, and trying to be as resourceful as we possibly can, while we also look back at what are the required places we have to continue spending, and how do we prioritize that and try to limit then the disruption or the impact in the other areas where we're having to decrease. But we will get all of that data to you so that you have it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And just please let us know, you know, some good points where we can start putting pressure. Thank you.
I think we have perhaps one more slide.
Just one more slide. Thank you. Okay. Department of Early Childhood. So a few line items and notes to flag here, and one bill in particular. So for the Universal Preschool Program, I mentioned this most of it just because of its overlap and with the Child Care Assistance Program and just the need and focus on that program as it's ramped up over the last couple of years. So the JBC did approve close to $54 million to support additional staff, support for local coordinating organizations that provide the UPK in communities, and different quality improvement initiatives for that population. So I think there are certainly challenges, even though this has dedicated funding through Proposition EE at the ballot that was approved a few years ago. The JBC and the legislature are having to make choices about the number of hours that kids in this program can be served, and the trade-off that is creating for those that are most at risk and in need. And I'm sure Heather and others can on the team can speak more to that. But even for those things that have dedicated funding and resources, there are certainly trade-offs that are being made and tough decisions that have significant sources of funding. So that problem is widespread. I think to focus in particular on the impacts for our department and the work we do here is around the Child Care Assistance Program, also known as CCAP. This did receive a $21 million increase in the state budget to support provider reimbursements, lower family copays, and infant and toddler enrollment, and paid child absences for this program. These are all different strategies that were funded using ARPA dollars. So these will be supported for through general fund funding at the state level for at least the next year. But so at least the state is helping continue that. But it's a concern of how these positive strategies continue to be funded in the long term, because we know the general fund is a limited resource and limited pot of funding at the state. Related to CCAP is House Bill 1223, which I know we've briefed you and updated you on throughout the session. This makes a number of changes to overhaul the CCAP program and try to improve access for families. There were a number of changes that would impact the operations at the county level that our staff weighed in on with CCI and our county partners to improve the bill. And we expect that all of the outstanding concerns or issues we had that would have been really technically challenging for us to work and implement will be resolved. I think what we're seeing is the state will request a 2-year waiver to delay implementation of most of the bill, because a lot of what's in the bill is trying to implement federal rule that came down this spring. So the states have 2 years to come into compliance with that federal rule. So at least there's time. Not all of the elements to it will be included. most of the changes that need to be required are around technical changes to the technological system that supports CCAP, and so it'll be phased in over time. I think the outstanding concerns that are being addressed are around presumptive eligibility for all kids. That will likely be struck from the bill, just given the technical challenges associated with it. There's an element of the bill that would provide categorical eligibility for children of childcare workers and education providers that will likely be limited based on their income and have certain portions of that excluded. So again, it's phased in slowly. And then there is a requirement in there that would add customer service as a provision to county contracts, county performance contracts with the state. And that definition will be narrowed to ensure it applies only to CCAP and not all human services related programs as it was written in the bill. There's a lot of different elements to that we can dive in if you have questions, but that's the high level overview. I think just the one thing to note about the budget allotment for CCAP is that it's will provide a minimal increase to allocations. I think what we expect to get would be very minimal. So out of that $20 million overall. So.
And we do anticipate continuing the freeze into the next state fiscal year, unfortunately. So we are not going through the process to purchase CCAP dollars from other counties like we can do, because the state has assured us and showed us all of the data reporting that our current spending in this state fiscal year will be covered, both by other counties that are underspent, but also by some additional ARPA funds that they still have. So we're not going through that process to try to transfer amongst counties before. The state will cover it in the end, but what we are spending now is still above what our allocation is slotted for next year. So we do anticipate keeping the freeze into the next state fiscal year and just continuing to evaluate it on a monthly basis.
Thank you. Commissioner.
Yeah, are we having, thank you. Are we having conversations with some of our nonprofit providers around like what it looks like to fill in the gaps, and are they able to help with that, and what does that look like?
Very good question, and I failed to mention this. So in your packet, you have a draft document. It hasn't been published for the public because it is a working document still. We are working on a joint statement with the United Way, the town of Estes, and the Early Childhood Council on the impact of CCAP and the greater need across the entire county. So we have the approval from all of the different organizations. We wanted to share it with you before we release it to all of the media outlets and different newspapers. So we're starting with this, and we've had additional conversations with Poudre School District as they've used CCAP. And ongoing conversations with United Way and the Early Childhood Council, more specifically, as they have the Larimer Child Care Fund that we have worked with them on over the last couple of years, where they're providing some funding to families that fall outside of CCAP eligibility. That's the way it was structured initially. But they are having to make decisions on whether they start to serve families that might be eligible for CCAP but can't get on CCAP because of the freeze. But there are three populations that are still added to the program even during a freeze or a wait list. Families that are involved in the child welfare system, families that are receiving Colorado Works or TANF, or families that are unhoused. Those are three populations we still have to serve. So we haven't seen an increase in families being added to the program. We've actually seen some families leave, so it's sort of balancing out. But the payments to providers is really where we struggle to reduce the spending. And so we are, because of spring break, CCAP is very seasonal as we look at the spending. It's much higher in the summer, it's much higher over the holiday break, it's much higher over spring break, because kids that normally would have part-time care are using full-time care. So we're still spending at very high rates even since the freeze. And there was an article in the Coloradoan last week. We are still encouraging families to apply. We still want them to apply because if we shift from a freeze to a wait list, we can go back to that list of people that have already applied. So we're still asking them to apply because it could change quickly where we're shifting to a wait list and we're able to add families slowly as other families leave.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I have a suggestion, and then I'd like to move on. At least give these guys 15 minutes to give us a departmental activity updates. And that is, I think the three of us would be interested in an update regarding the rollout of universal preschool in Larimer County and the intersection between that and the CCAP program. I think initially we had some concerns about that intersection. So I think maybe the start of the state fiscal year, July or so, we could have some kind of a work session that maybe gives us an update on where we're at working with our community partners on the CCAP enrollment freeze, but also how our local coordinating organization is rolling out universal pre-K in Larimer County and how that is impacting or not the access to CCAP. And
Christina Taylor, who's the CEO of the council, and I already have a work session scheduled with you for July 1st. So we will.
then I appreciate you taking my suggestion to very serious consideration. Okay, if we're okay, let's move on to the next part. I really would like to end by noon.
Yes, we will, and we're going to try for 5 before.
And we need to figure out a way, because these folks always get shortchanged, and I think what they have to share is important too. So we need to give that some thought.
So the department, our plan was to highlight one piece of the department activity report for each division. But instead of doing that, we want to give you an update. We're changing the format of the department activity report to shift it to a dashboard and to also then move forward in making that publicly available. So Jill's going to give you that update, and then we can point out the data points. The SNAP caseload is in there. The adult protection workload is in there. So we can flag that for you and follow up by email after if we don't have time. So I'll turn it over to Jill.
I'm Jill Maasch with Administration, Communication, and Excellence. I know you guys want to hear from me every time we meet, and I never get a chance to talk, so I'm very excited today. So what I will do is just bring up the Tableau dashboard. So usually what we do is we provide you with a PowerPoint presentation. That's not what I wanted. A PowerPoint presentation or a Google Slides. And so I thought I would go through the process of how that worked in the past and then what it's going to look like now. So in the past, it's taken about 13 hours each time we create that report for you guys. So that's a lot of the data team. So Rebecca Stage on our team and Taylor Little, who are not here right now, but they spend a lot of time making sure that they're getting information from each of the divisions to make sure that it's uploaded into different spreadsheets. And then I take that spreadsheet and create that PowerPoint that you guys had seen. So that was about 13 hours each time we do it to create that. So what we did was we wanted to move this to a Tableau dashboard so that we could eventually make it public and something that's connected to our website. And so Taylor and Rebecca spent about 128 hours to create this Tableau dashboard. So we're really good at tracking time on our team. And so we tracked about 128 hours to build out 19 pages that are now in Tableau that will be automated. So there's only 3 pieces. Right now there's 5 pieces that are not completely automated. In the future, there will only be 3 pieces that are not completely automated, meaning that data will come from systems, go into spreadsheets, and then pull into Tableau directly. So no people will have to touch any of those processes. They will just run in the background. So we'll be saving 13 hours, so it'll go down to about 3 hours every time we have to do this, just to make sure the data is populating correctly and that nothing's broken. So we're pretty excited about that. And then, like I said, our next step is to publish this. So we wanted you guys to see it first. And then eventually we will publish this and have it publicly available on our website, and it will actually automatically update monthly. And so this is very similar to what Health has out there for their dashboard, in that it's living on the Health's website. It'll live on Human Services website. And this will live in addition to the budget performance measures that we work with Matthew Bahanan on in the budget office. Questions about that? See, I saved time for you guys.
When do you anticipate we'll make up the 128 hours?
Oh, we have plenty. We have about 65 different requests that are sitting in backlog right now.
Okay.
And we're continuing to build out dashboards as well. So,
Yeah. I was just mostly kidding. So let's, we have about 10 minutes. Are we going to get some information here? Please.
We're going to shift to Vanessa to cover SNAP.
Thank you. Thanks, Jill, by the way.
See if it will load. Thank you again. Good morning. Vanessa Fewell, Division Manager with Benefits and Community Support. So I oversee the teams that process the food assistance applications. So here on this slide, dashboard, because it's no longer a slide, it is an active dashboard. This shows the amount of funds that have been issued by the food assistance program, and then that's the green bar there, and then the yellow bar is TANF benefits that have been issued. So this slide shows, I think it says 17 million issued in the quarter. And you'll remember that the max allotment ended in 2023, right? So this is demonstrating that the caseload is continuing to grow. We are holding steady over 18,000 cases in SNAP, and those are households, so not individuals, those are households across Larimer County. I was looking at it this morning, about 18,300 now. So we are seeing that caseload continue to grow. And just commenting back on what Heather was mentioning earlier, that we're holding on those positions related to the budget that we have available to administer these programs. I also wanted to note that in our last meeting, you asked for a demographics sheet. Our data team was very busy building this out, so we hope to have that for the next time that we come before you as Board of Social Services, so that you can have the breakdown of our caseload. It will be a point in time report at that time.
Just for context, so in the fall and into early 2020, we were serving just over 12,000 households in SNAP. So we've gone from 12,000 to 18,300 just in the last 4 years. So it's a very significant increase. Why don't we go to adult protection, which was another one that we highlighted.
Okay. Lori Metz, I'm Division Manager, Aging and Adult Services again. You get to hear from me. So here we have in the adult protection dashboard is that you'll see from the last quarter of 2023 to the first quarter of this year that our referrals have gone up by over 100. So that's 30 a month roughly, which is adding a significant amount of staff time as we do staff those in a group and team setting each day, Monday through Friday. So we're seeing an increased workload there from that standpoint. But you will see that the referrals that are assigned stay pretty steady. And so we live in that 20%-ish range of what is opened. And the reasoning behind that is sometimes those don't meet criteria for assessment, or if those referrals are on current open cases. The allegations are added in versus adding in a new assessment on that side.
Thad, do you want to highlight one for child welfare?
Yeah, maybe go to caseload. So you'll notice on there we go. Again, Thad Paul, Division Manager, Child, Youth, and Family. Just wanted to pull up the caseload, and it's partly to kind of emphasize what Heather mentioned earlier about kind of reduction of services because of the budget challenges. So you'll notice there it's not a substantial change from quarter 4 to quarter 1, but it is a relatively substantial change from quarter 1 of 2023 to 2024. So that 150-ish difference there is about 75 cases. We have, as Heather mentioned, we froze 8 positions within child welfare because of our budget challenges, or our allocation challenges, maybe is the better way to say that. And we also have a supervisor and a deputy division manager that are both leaving the agency that we're going to put on interim freeze as well. So we're having some, and the reason I wanted to highlight the workload is that obviously reduction of mandated service positions is an impact to the workload of everybody else. To your comment, Commissioner Shattuck McNally. So we're in the process of doing a really deep dive on where our opportunities to become more aligned with our future allocation, which may include things such as our prevention program that you guys are aware of. That grant is running out, and that may be at risk of not being able to be sustained through our current allocation, because we have mandated functions and we have the non-mandated function. And that, although that is a hugely valuable and a resource we don't want to lose, it is not a mandated function. So I just wanted to highlight that we are increasing caseload while we are at the same time reducing service delivery as well as staffing capacity.
Why don't we pause there and just see if I think those are the high points of, but you have the full presentation. And then, like Jill said, this will be, so right now we only do this presentation quarterly. We prepare the data once every 3 months. So we will be shifting to have it publicly available and uploaded monthly, so that it's more feasible for the public to access to in between meetings. But I'll pause just to see if there are questions on any of those data points.
Commissioner?
This is another parking lot question, so don't, because we're almost out of time, but knowing the website accessibility bill that I had to scramble on last week, this is wonderful to have this dashboard. I think it's wonderful, but knowing that we may not get that or some of those challenges, just curious how we can make this accessible, and if that, because I know other counties are pulling things down and at the sake of, or at the against transparency, kind of just to be able to meet. So I'm just curious, this is wonderful to have up, but now I'm got the lens of, is this kind of provide us some challenges? So I just want to ask that offline, have that on my other list of how all this is able to meet those requirements, because now I'm kind of a little more worried if that bill doesn't pass for this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Stevens, any questions or comments?
Just a comment. Thank you for all your work. Clearly, some good news and then some, worrisome news. So I think that's how it always works in your space, is funding is always, something that we're concerned about. So I certainly think all these conversations are relevant as we talk about, potential cuts in the budget with regard to property tax and unfunded mandates, and some of this is really crucial work that we do in our community. And so I appreciate having the information. Certainly happy to advocate where we can, but it's clear that there's just not enough dollars to be able to fund some of these really important programs, and we're really going to need to put some pressure on the state to make sure that they understand some of the implications when these programs aren't funded. So thank you all for the work.
Also, thank you. I do have I think a quick question, but perhaps, gratitude to all of you. I mean, ongoing, consistent, excellent work. Those who work in the policy legislative space are challenged to keep up with things, and I appreciate that Stuart and I'm sure members of your team are able to work with Shane and other folks, subject matter experts within the organization, do our best to keep up with not only the human services legislation, but the other types of legislation. So perhaps a special shout out to you and Shane and other folks. My question is regarding this community dashboard. What are the plans for getting this out into the community so they're aware of it in a meaningful way?
We will, as it's publicly available, then we will wrap a whole communication strategy around it. We might do a press release. We'll get it out to all of our community partners, as well as internal departments, and just publish it as best we can, sharing it in different venues that we have as we meet with them too, so that people are aware it's there.
And presumably that'll include social media posts like Facebook, because
Yes.
I think when Tom Clayton gets those put together, whoever gets it, then we often get it, and then we can share it on our Facebook pages, which I think reaches, perhaps a more general public. So please keep that in mind.
Yes, we
So
will.
I think at 11:59 and 45 seconds, we are adjourned on time. Oh, and thanks to Justine and Cassidy, always able to problem solve and always able to pivot. Thank you, folks.
Thank you all.
I just want to say my heartfelt gratitude to all of you. Just tremendous work. I really feel bad for all the challenges. We'll just see what we can do to support you all. Thank you.